Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Larry Rolla.
That's what I started doing in a big way. So the beginning of the winter meet, which is what I'm talking about now, where the handle rose dramatically, the mutual handle, because now they were getting bets from all over New York City through OTB, and it was the only track open in the whole United States. So one day, I get a call I get a page to the stable gate at Monticello. And I go down to the stable gate, and who is it but Tony Shula, the guy from Boston, and with his two big goons. Together, they probably weighed, uh, I think they weighed 400 pounds each. They were huge, big guys, 6.5 feet tall, huge guys. And that's how they intimidated all the jockeys in Boston all them years, just by their size alone. Uh, so I go to I go out the gate and I says, "Well, what the hell are you doing here?" And he says, "Ain't you happy to see me?" Give me all that bullshit. And I says, "What are you doing here?" And he says, "It's the only game in town. That's what I'm doing here." So I wasn't going to chase him. I figured we made a lot of money. He got me off the snide. He got me off of 4 years of starvation. So I figured, all right. So the handle was going to be good enough and everything. So we start doing that. In the meantime, during that time, I had a terrible addiction, and the football season was on at that point.
Yeah.
And now Sunday comes, and I had started already betting with Kabert, and there was a Jewish bookmaker up there, Bonnie Cutler. He was from the old Meyer Lansky crew. So I start betting with both of them because in the beginning they give me $1,000 limit on the game, and then it rose to 2,000, 3,000. And the only reason it rose is because every Tuesday I'd pay. I'd show up with the money and pay, and they knew I was in big action, so they took whatever. And my limit quickly rose to whatever. It was no limit. Um, so um, Barney Cutler basically did the same thing. So now I had two guys that I could bet with, probably, and then now football was there, and I was betting, uh, maybe 5,000 a game, but I bet 10, 11 games and with both of them. So naturally, in football, like any other sport, I guess, but football for some reason, statistically, the better wins 3 to 4 games the most out of the 15, 16 games that they play, including the Super Bowl. So you got no chance. And when you start with the parlays and all that bullshit, you really got no chance. But I was betting 10, 11 games every Sunday, and it went from 5,000 a game to 10,000 a game to 20,000 a game. Before you know it, I'm betting $500,000 a weekend between the two guys. So naturally, you win some, you lose some, but the bottom line is you're always losing. So if you're betting, say, 200,000 with one guy, you may only lose 50,000 or 80,000 or something like that, because you just don't win. It's stupid. It's like them football cards. You got no chance. You could sell them football cards where they try to pick 10 games in a row, and you could spend the money before the games are even over because nobody ever wins. So anyway, to skip right through this, the addiction became very, very, very bad. But I was making the money up fixing the races. Now I'm starting to go broke. But I had the addiction. When Sunday came, if I didn't bet, I was shaking. And they're used to me betting now 10, 20,000 a game. So naturally, you don't only want to keep that up, you have to keep it up because the chase starts. You're chasing money, you're chasing the money. And you say, geez, I just lost $1.5 million between these two guys, and you just can't stop. You can't.
And you're betting your credit now. You start to bet your credit now, right?
I'm betting everything. If I could have sold my eyeball, I would have sold my eyeball. But anyway, what happened was I went completely broke. So I make up an excuse. I get a hold of Bert and Bonnie and I say, listen, I'm going to Florida. They don't know I'm broke. They still think I'm in big action with unlimited money. So I said, I'm going to Florida to buy some property. I said, so I won't be back for 2 or 3 weeks. And they said what I knew they were going to say because I'm a cash cow for them. No problem. Just call up. We'll give you the line. And I says, yeah, but what if I'm not back? I won't be back. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Your credit's good with us. And I knew they were going to say that. So I left. I really did go to Florida. And the first week, same thing. Bet the same way. Didn't change. 10, 20,000 a game. And lose. By the end of the 3 weeks, I knew I had to go back because the second week, when I owed maybe 300,000. I said, okay, we're having the closing. I won't be back. No worry. You want the line? Yep, I want the line. So the third week, I wind up losing close to, between the both of them, close to $700,000-800,000, something like that. And I had you either kill yourself then, run away, or you go back. I never ran away from nothing, so I go back. And when I went back, Bert sends one of his guys to pick me up at the airport. It was Newark Airport.
Are you nervous when he comes?
Well, yeah, it's. I guess you're a little nervous. I wasn't too nervous about Barney because Barney was like 80 years old, and I had a girl up there, Gina, who lived in the same complex as he did, and she got very friendly with him because she used to make my payments with him and collect with him all the time. And he wasn't doing that well, and she used to take him to doctors, and she make him breakfast in the morning, and so I wasn't worried about him because Gina had him covered pretty good, but I still never missed a payment with him. But yeah. Bert was the madman because then I realized who he was. I knew who he was. He was just a mad dog with no conscience. Killed 17 guys. He just a bad guy. Just a bad guy with no conscience. So was I a little nervous? I was a little nervous only because of Bert. Because he was the kind of guy that leave you right in the street. If you owed him 10,000, just to let everybody know, you don't fuck with him. And so I was a little bit nervous. The reason I wasn't really nervous was because he got almost $1 million of my money, and I owed him I think it was 380,000 out of the month because the other half I owed to Barney. And it wasn't that he gave me the money. It was a bet I lost. It wasn't money out of his pocket. It was
it's like free money out of the air. Me and you are going to make a bet.
And plus,
I lose.
I paid for a year. I lost a lot of money to him, and he knew I was in big action. So I really wasn't that worried. I thought we could make some kind of deal. So the guy picks me up. He says, you want to go home, get whatever you got to get and go see the man? And I says, no, I don't have the money. And he says, you got a problem. And I says, I know. So he says, I have to call him. So he calls him up and he says, I got to come down there the next morning. So the next morning I go down there. The guy picks me up. He takes me down to Atlantic Highlands. Bert had a club down there. Anyway, we walk in this little place, and he's sitting in the back with two of it, just like in a gangster movie. He's sitting in the back in a corner, round table with two guys drinking demi-tasse, smoking cigars, and he walks me back there, and Bert don't say a word. He just gets up and they walk out the back door and we follow him and walk down the street onto the pier. There's a pier down there with a bunch of boats in Atlantic Highlands, and they walk out on the dock or whatever it is, and they walk to some boat, and we get in the boat, and they put me downstairs, and a half hour later, they're out in the ocean.
They'd start driving the boat.
Yeah, yeah, they're going out in the ocean. And I was getting a little nervous at that point because I knew Kabert was just a mad dog, but they bring me upstairs, and he's like a 55-gallon drum, but not a half of drum, like a garbage pail. He says, "Step in there." I step in there, and these two guys, they pour a bag of cement, a couple of bags of cement, and they have a pump there. They're pumping water into it. And Kabert comes out from the cabin there, and he walks right up to me, right up to my nose, and he says, "Sammy," the guy I was betting with, his guy, he says, "He let you get too far, and that's on him. You went too far, and that's on you. You took a shot. You took a shot at me. Now you tell me why I shouldn't let this cement harden and throw you the fuck overboard." And I said, "Because I could pay."
And he's done this shit before.
Oh yeah, many, many times. But not different situations. I mean, other guys took shots where they had no reason to pay, and they took shots after maybe beating them. And but my situation was a little different. So he said, "You could pay." He says, "Okay." He says, "Being you could pay, I'm going to make this 300. I don't know what it was, 380, I guess, 380. I'm going to make it a Shylock loan. So every week you come and you see Sammy, and you give him $7,200 a week. You got a Shylock loan for 2 points. You miss one payment, and you'll be right back here, and there'll be no heading back." So he let me go. They drove me back home, and I made the same deal with Barney. So now I had to come up with almost $16,000 a week in VIG. Still owed the principal, and that started me on a race fixing job like I never had before, and it gets very, very involved with. I mean, I can go on. I don't know how much time we have, but I can go on and tell you what happened after that.
Sure, I'm all ears, man.
The winter meet ended, so the big handle ended. Now we were down to a handle of 200,000 a night, where the most I could win fixing races is maybe 1,000 or two a night, and it wasn't enough for me to maintain my lifestyle, which was going out every night, listening to music, maintain the horses that I had, and come up with 16,000 a week. It wasn't enough. But I was devising of something because I at that time, I feel bad for all the people that don't, all your listeners and yourself if you're not involved with horse racing. But there was a jockey back then for the thoroughbreds called Manny Ukaza. He was a Hall of Fame jockey. And he got in a bad spill at Santa Anita, and he broke his both knees, so he couldn't ride anymore. So he lived in Corona, Queens. He had a place there with his wife, and they asked Charles Sutsky, who owned the racetrack, if any trainer would teach Manny how to train and drive harness horses. So naturally, Charles asked me, and naturally, I could never turn Charles down, because once we get into that story about Charles, how he protected me, basically knew what I was doing, gave me a $50,000 check cashing privilege, started me on a 3-state kite going. See, that's what I mean. If I don't, there's so much involved. The 3-state kite, how I did it, how I come up with money, how I had to do all of this stuff. Because if I just say that I did it, how the hell did you do it? So I try to explain it, but I'm not explaining it. But I started a 3-state kite going back then in 3 different states with the savings and loan people. And back then they had no computers, so if you cashed a check, and if I cashed a check at Monticello Racetrack for 20,000, I had 10 days to make that check good because they had no computers. It took 10 days with the savings and loan back then. And I did that with three different states, and plus I had check cashing. That's in case I got jammed up, which I always did. I went into counterfeit money with Scarfa, the guy from what the hell's his name? Guy from Philly.
Nicky Scarfo.
Yeah, well, he had a guy with him called I don't know, starts with a C, the Crow. I think they call him the
Pro
Crow.
Caramonde.
Yeah, that's it. He was dealing counterfeit money.
Nicky the Crow.
Yeah. He back in the 70s when this was, he was dealing with counterfeit money, and according to my friend, I didn't know my friend, one of the runners I had. He come to me and he told me I could buy $100,000 of counterfeit hundreds for 10,000. So that's what I did. So I can't get it out. I'm starting to stray now. But anyway, these are the things I was doing to kind of make up. You got to have cash flow. If you have cash flow, you could do anything. So I just needed cash flow, whether it be counterfeit money, kiting checks, whatever, as long as there was cash flow.
Now, what would you do? Take the counterfeit money, put it in the good money, and then
Well,
distribute it with bets and things like that?
well, you see, now it gets a little involved. In the beginning, I told them just what you said. Just mix it in, put it in, and go to these OTB offices or go to Belmont and Aqueduct Racetrack or whatever. And kind of after a while, you get friendly with 1 or 2 tellers, and you give them 10% of whatever you're going to bet, and you can only do it once or twice, and then they catch it after a while. But there were days when you could bet, you could wash maybe 100,000 at the racetracks.
Nowadays, the cameras don't catch you doing it. You're done.
What we were able to do back then, you could never do today. See, I went off course, and now I forgot where the hell. Okay, so Manny Ukaza. So now I'm training Manny Ukaza, and I wind up getting him his license. I signed for his license and everything else. I put him on a couple of horses, a couple of races that I fixed, and he won. In fact, he got a big write-up. He won his first race, and they gave him a big write-up. But I asked him, I said, listen, because now I had a serious problem. I had to be fixing races. Was the only way I could make that kind of money. And but I couldn't do it at Monticello. But because I had Manny Ukaza, who lived with me for a year, there was an old jockey called Con Erico.
I've heard of him too.
Huh?
I've heard of him too. I've heard of all these guys.
He was an old timer. He was a little older than Manny, but he still kept his license. He rode every once in a while at Aqueduct and Belmont. But all the jockeys, all the newer jockeys coming up, Baeza and Ukaza and Cardero, and all of them guys, they all knew him well. They all come. I think they probably come from the same country. But anyway, I knew that he was hanging out in a bar, a restaurant. Oh God, I almost had the name of it. I'm in Sunnyside, Queens, down that way. And so I asked Manny if he knew him. He said, "Of course, I know him my whole life." So I says, "I want to meet him. He seems like an interesting guy." And we went down there, had dinner. I met him, and when Manny went to the bathroom, I says to him, I says, "Con," I says, "I have a situation. I know you're not doing too well." He rides 100-to-1 shots maybe once a week. He wasn't doing well at all. And I says, I know you're not doing well, but I have an idea where we can make a lot of money. I said, but I don't. You know how Manny is. I don't want. Manny was a little wacky. He was straight, narrowed, and a little crazy. I don't want Manny to know about this. Will you be here tomorrow? Yeah. So next night I go back, and I made a deal with them that made me millions and millions of dollars. And the deal was, I says to him the next night, I says, do you know these jockeys? And I knew the answer to this, but I asked him anyway. Do you know these jockeys that are riding there now? Cordero, Yukaza, Baeza, all them top guys. He says, of course I know. I practically raised them. I said, you know how far you can go with them, right? As far as asking them for favors and everything. He says, yeah. He says, they'll do anything I ask them. I says, no, 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 no. I says, you got to listen to me now. I says, what I'm going to ask you now, you can't say anything that you can't do. If you can do it, then you say it. If you can't do it, don't think you could do it and tell me you could.